I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Village and Pinehurst Planning and Zoning Board for November 7th, 2024. The time is 4 o'clock. My name is Matt Jones, and I will be chairing tonight's meeting. We do have a quorum tonight as a board, so we can conduct business. To start with, I'll ask the board members to introduce themselves. We'll start down here with Jimmy.
Louise Mercuro.
Tom Schroeder.
Sonia Rothstein.
Paul Roberts.
Carol Henry.
Thank you. Bruce, double check your microphone. I think it's blinking.
Check.
So I'd like to welcome everyone to our meeting here today. If there is any member of the public who wishes to speak during the public comment period, there are sign-ups in the back of the room. So feel free to avail yourself to those sign-ups now, and we will collect those in a few minutes. According to our published agenda, we have the minutes from the October 3rd regular meeting to approve. All board members should have received a copy. Any comments on the meeting minutes as recorded from the October 3rd Planning and Zoning Board meeting?
I have none.
If no comments, I would look for a motion to
approve.
Second.
Motion by Bruce, second by Tom. All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes have been approved as written.
We're getting it.
We're doing good.
Problem solved.
Good reminder, if you do happen to have your cell phone on, please silence it. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing pertaining to a conditional rezoning request for 52 McIntyre Road. I would first like to ask if any of the board members have any potential conflicts of interest to declare that would be associated with this application. Hearing none, I see no problems herein. Now I'm looking for a motion to recess the regular meeting and enter into the public hearing.
I move to adjourn the regular meeting at whatever time it is, 4:05.
And a second?
Okay.
Motion made by Louise, second by Paul. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have now entered into the public hearing. We can now look to staff. Maria, would you lead us in staff presentation?
I would be happy to. All right. We are here tonight for a public hearing to consider an official zoning map amendment for approximately 0.7 acres of land located at the intersection of Kelly Road and McIntyre Road. The property is owned by Bloom Precision Aesthetics, PLLC. The applicant is Retson Companies, Inc. The parcel is further identified by the parcel ID number 000-18470. This proposed map amendment would zone the property from the current neighborhood commercial to the village placed form-based district, Block F, conditional district. The proposed rezoning and associated general concept plan would allow for the development of two-story mixed-use buildings with associated parking. The public hearing was advertised and noticed in accordance with the PDO and North Carolina general statutes. So again, we are here for a conditional zoning map amendment. What is that? It is a legislative decision, and it requires a public hearing. So that's what we're here for tonight. The applicant may propose, and the local government can consider specific conditions that are related to this specific project. All those conditions must be mutually agreed upon. The public hearing held by the Planning and Zoning Board is for a recommendation, which would then be forwarded to the Village Council. In making your recommendation tonight, you would need to consider the adopted comprehensive plan, any other plans, staff recommendation, and any input from the public. We do require that a general concept plan is submitted with the application, And if that is approved, it becomes a site-specific development plan and a condition of the rezoning, along with any other conditions that you approve. So what is our conditional zoning process? First, it starts with an application submitted to the planning department. We review that quickly, and then we send that off to our technical review committee, or TRC. That's made up of people from fire, from Moore County Public Utilities, from planning, from building, and public services. TRC reviews that. They provide comments. We send those comments to the applicant. The applicant then makes revisions and sends those back for additional review, and we go through that process until everyone is happy. Then that goes to you, the planning board, for a public hearing, which you would then make a recommendation to council. After it goes through planning and zoning, then it would go to council, who will then hold another public hearing, and they will review the proposal. If council approves it, then construction plans can be submitted to the TRC, at which point no major changes can be made to the plan, and I'll talk about that a little more in a moment. If it is denied, the applicant can appeal that to the Superior Court of Moore County. There is one extra layer here before the next part where construction drawings can be submitted. This property is in the historic district, so it would have to go before them before construction drawings can be submitted. But once they approve it, they can submit their construction drawings for review with the TRC. Then once those are approved, construction can begin on the site. And then after all the infrastructure is installed, inspected, and approved, permits can be applied for the buildings. Throughout the process, as approvals are secured, various vested rights are secured, and those run with the property. So as I mentioned before, once the plans are approved by council, there can be no substantial changes. Minor changes, if they have any of those can be approved by staff, but any major changes would have to go through this whole zoning process again. So some examples of substantial changes would be modification of design standards or other requirements specified by enacting the ordinance, a change in land use or development type beyond that permitted by the approved general concept plan, introduction of any new vehicular access points to an existing street that was not previously designated for access, when the total floor plan of a commercial classification is increased by more than 10% beyond the total floor area approved, when the height of the structure is increased more than 10% by what was approved, if the open space is decreased or the impervious surface increases, and any proposed change that has a discernible impact on neighboring properties and the general public. So a little background and what the request is. Again, it's conditional rezoning for 0.7 acres from neighborhood commercial to the form-based district Block F in Village Place. It's two-story buildings with the associated parking. So they have a north building that they are asking for mixed use, which would be residential and retail office space. The footprint of the building is 6,500 square feet. Overall, it would be 13,000 square feet. The south building is in the rear of the property. That would also be mixed use with residential on the second floor and medical office space on the first floor. The footprint of that is 3,300 square feet. The overall square footage is 6,600 square feet. They are proposing a parking lot in the rear of the north building with additional spaces to be added along Kelly Road, and they're requesting credit for shared parking with 19 spaces that are existing along McIntyre Road. The parcel is located right at the corner of McIntyre and Kelly Road. It's in the corporate limits of the village and in the historic district, and included with the district approval are general concept plan, the parking plan, architectural elevations, a trip gen, and a neighborhood meeting report. So here's kind of an overview of the site. You can see where the parcel is located here at the corner of McIntyre and Kelly. The overall layout with the two buildings, the parking, the additional parking to be added on Kelly Road, and then the 19 spaces along McIntyre. We'll zoom in a little bit more so you can see a little better. So they are proposing the north building to be frontage along McIntyre Road. They would have a 10-foot setback, a 10-foot build-to line with a 10-foot sidewalk there. The parking would be behind the north building, and then the south building would be behind that at the rear of the property. They're also proposing to put 5-foot sidewalks along Kelly Road, and they would be required to do a Class 3 buffer, which would only be 15 feet because it's across the right-of-way from residential properties. They have open space. They will have associated landscaping. But that is the overall concept plan. Also, let me point out, they do have an underwater detention stormwater system, so that would be under the parking lot in the northwest corner. So the Village Place Form-Based District was established following extensive and detailed review, which I'm sure many of you that were on the planning board remember that then. It was adopted with the Village Place Small Area Plan and the Form-Based Guidance Plan. And that was all a result of a goal from the 2019 comp plan. In the PDO, section 8.5.1, there's a table of permitted uses that shows what the zoning is and what uses are allowed in each block in Village Place. And you can see they all have, this is just a little snippet from it, but they all have a CZ there, which means any new development in any of those blocks for those uses requires a conditional rezoning. The area around our parcel, you can see the parcel that is in the red, that is our 52 McIntyre. To the east, we have residential. To the north, there is a mix of residential and some commercial. To the west is Clark Chevrolet, more commercial. And then to the south, we have the parcel that is right adjacent to it is also neighborhood commercial, and then residential behind that. Little more information. So the proposal does include open space. 8% minimum is required, and they are at 8% for open space. A planted buffer is required along the eastern perimeter, which I mentioned, the Class 3 buffer of 15 feet. They also will have other landscaping requirements, like around the parking lot, that they will need to meet. This property is located in the Nicks Creek Cape Fear Watershed Protection District, which limits non-residential development to 24% of built-upon area. Therefore, a special intensity allocation would be needed. That is automatically granted with the approval of the conditional rezoning. And there are approximately 290 acres left to allocate in that watershed district. Stormwater management is proposed as the underground detention system in the northwest portion of the property. BPMs are required. Water and sewer would be served by Moore County Public Utilities, and they do have the proposed layout for that on the general concept plan. They are required for any conditional rezoning to hold a neighborhood meeting, which they did in May, and in your packets you all had the neighborhood meeting report for that. Access onto the property would be from Kelly Road in between the two buildings that they are proposing. Sidewalks, as I mentioned, would be along McIntyre Road and Kelly Road. And they are proposing 26 parking spaces be provided off-street, that would be in the parking lot on the property, with additional spaces to be added on-street along Kelly Road. And then they are asking for credit for the existing spaces that are along McIntyre Road. There are dimensional criterias for the form-based districts, which you can find on table 9.2b. So here we have what is required for the different setbacks and what is proposed. These are also for build-to lines, building height, impervious surface. So you can see they're meeting most of them. The front build-to line for the front building, the north building is at 10 feet. The interior side setback is 0 to 5 feet. It's 5 feet minimum if they are proposing a space or setback between buildings. They're at 15.4 feet for the north building. The side build-to line is 10 feet, and theirs varies from 15 feet to 25.7 feet. With that class 3 buffer required along Kelly Road, they would have to be at least 15 feet. So they do meet that partially, but they are asking for a condition for that. The rear setback is 15 feet. They're at 9 feet 10 inches from the rear setback on the south building. The lot width and the lot depth, they more than meet those. The max building height is 35 feet in that district, and they are proposing 36.2 feet. So they would have to ask for a condition for that. The max impervious surface is 70%. They are right below that at 69%. And again, the minimum amount of open space is 8%, which is right what they are at. So here we have the conditions table. You also got a copy of this in your packets. So the different conditions that they are asking, applicants can propose to have more restricted conditions, or they can lax different requirements. So for the permitted uses, you can see requirement. These are just the uses that are allowed in that block currently. There's a whole lot of them, those two columns there. So they are requesting to limit those uses. They're looking at dwelling mixed use, things like banks, business offices, financial services, professional services, personal services, retail, restaurants, and things to that effect. So a much more limited amount of uses. They are asking for a condition on the building height. As I said, it's 2 stories at 35 feet is the requirement, and they are at 36.2 feet. The side corner build-to line is 10 feet, and theirs varies from 15 to 25.7, and part of that is due to the landscape buffer along Kelly Road. The rear setback, 15 feet minimum, they're at 9.10. And interior side setback, they're at 15.4, and it's a minimum of 5 feet if separation is desired between the buildings. The other condition that they are asking for is parking. So the requirement, if you go through all the different uses that they're proposing and what the PDO has for the required parking for them, you can read through it, but the total required parking for all of their uses would be 59 spaces. And they are requesting to provide 26 parking spaces on site, off-street parking in the parking lot. That'd be 24 regular with 2 ADA spaces. Then they are proposing to add spaces along Kelly Road. They have 10, I think they gave you 2 options in the parking plans in your packet. And then on street on McIntyre, they are requesting credit for the 19 parking spaces there for shared parking. So you can also see their parking plan in the agenda packet that you were received. So when you are considering any zoning amendments, you have to consider the comprehensive plan. Our comp plan has 7 guiding principles along with the different implementation strategies. So guiding principle number 2, balancing conservation and growth, is balancing the need to conserve land while allowing purposeful quality development in strategic locations to meet the needs of residents, businesses, and visitors. And then if you look at implementation strategy to go along with that, 2.8, create a small area plan for the Village Place Rattlesnake Trail corridor depicted in Focus Area 4 to create a mixed-use walkable destination area that is connected to the village center. Focus Area 4, you can see that here, a little better here. And in the comp plan, when they created this focus area, you can see that that parcel that we're looking at was actually included in Focus Area 4. Along with the comp plan, you would also need to look at the small area plans that was created to go along with that implementation strategy, create a small area plan. So we have our Village Place Small Area Plan, which was adopted to help guide for the future development. And that has the guiding principles that include things like the connected circulation networks, complete streets, strengthen building frontage, public open spaces, flexible streets, promote health and wellness through neighborhood design. It includes recommendations for typical street sections, things like sidewalks, landscape areas, and parallel parking where that's feasible. It gives you designs for that. And it has preferred build-out plans, which does incorporate mixed use south of McCaskill Road. The form-based guidance plan, that was kind of a companion guide to go along with the small area plan. And that kind of went over different design types, landscaping, architectural design. So one of the goals was to explore a variety of building types like mixed use, office, retail, and residential. The form-based guidance plan has a regulating plan, which that is kind of a key for the different blocks as to what type of uses they want there, what type of buildings they want there. So for block F, which is just adjacent to the property, they're looking at building types for mixed use, office, and retail, and building heights of 1 to 2 stories. So you can see in the comp plan, the parcel was included in Focus Area 4, but in talks when they were going through what areas to have in the Village Place form-based district, they decided to keep that property out of it. There are street design recommendations for the area in the form-based guidance plan. Again, things like the parallel parking, complete streets, what kind of building types, there's all kind of guidance in there for what they'd like the area to look like. It also includes architectural design recommendations for exterior exterior materials, building elements, roofs, doors, windows, what kind of roofs they want, the pitch that they want on the roofs. They prefer no flat roofs that are street facing. They have guidelines for glazing on the buildings, so it's all included in the architectural designs. Plan consistency. So in considering a recommendation for the zoning amendment, you need to review the request and comment on whether the proposed action is consistent with the adopted comprehensive plan and any other applicable plans that have been adopted. North Carolina General Statutes 160D says a local government may prepare and adopt other plans as deemed appropriate. This may include, but is not limited to, small area plans. So those you also need to review. Staff does believe that the proposal is consistent with the 2019 comp plan, and it is largely consistent with the small area plan and form-based guidance plan. The areas that the proposal are not consistent and the applicant is seeking development conditions include the building setbacks and build to lines, the building height, and the parking. And they're also seeking a condition to limit the uses that are allowed for the property. So what do you need to do now? You conduct this public hearing and review all the material and the plans along with staff recommendation. And then after the public hearing, you can take one of the following actions. You can recommend approval of the proposed conditional zoning with the stated specific conditions and make a statement of consistency with the comp plan and other plans. You can recommend denial of the proposed conditional rezoning with the stated conditions and make a statement of consistency with the comp plan and the other plans. Or if you feel that additional information is needed or things weren't fully addressed, then you can continue the public hearing. But if you decide to do that, when you make a motion for that, you also need to pick the date and time that that's going to happen. A recommendation should be made within 30 days. After 30 days, Village Council may consider the proposed amendment without a recommendation. What is staff's recommendation? Staff finds that the proposal is largely consistent with the recommendations of the comp plan, the small area plan, and the form-based guidance plan. Also, it meets the standards that were with the recently adopted Village Pace form-based district zoning amendments. We do recommend further discussion on the proposed shared parking request. The Village Place small area plan and guidance plan do recommend new on-street parking to serve the mixed-use commercial building types, but also recommend a dedicated and somewhat centralized parking option. No shared parking agreement has been drafted, and it hasn't been fully determined how many spaces are available with the existing spaces along McIntyre during the week and during the different times of days. Additionally, we do recommend you consider the following added condition, that building design elements be provided and agreed upon for the buildings. So the applicant would provide design elements, what materials they're using, colors, roof pitch, glazing, all that stuff. And that condition would have to be also agreed to by the applicant. And that is the end of my presentation. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Maria. Looking to the board, do you have any questions at this point pertaining to any of the presentation information from Maria that you'd like to ask her? Reserve the right to ask staff questions the whole meeting, but particularly now anything that's just been said. Yep.
So, Maria, the one thing I would ask is, again, when the small area plans were developed, there was a decision made to leave this parcel out of that village-based district. It'd be nice if we had some background on that decision-making process. The other thing, the small area plan, and you referenced it here, that mixed use should be south of McCaskill Road. This parcel is actually northeast of McCaskill Road.
My bad in directions there.
So, like I said,
That
just,
area it is
yeah,
specified
but
for
just some things, again, before we rezone something, it would be nice to have some of that. I was not on the board whenever some of these decisions were made, but when it was initially on there, why it was taken off to begin with.
I did sit through all those talks. I'm not exactly sure for all the reasons. I think some of it was because of the residential being right across the street from it. Alex may have other memories of what was discussed there.
I think there was also something about McIntyre being extended and doing something on that end when we went through this plan. Do you remember that? Because we weren't sure about that corner because of the residential, and that's why we did what we did.
I think whenever we discussed that in this room as a group before making a recommendation to council, we probably spent 4 or 5 minutes discussing it. I don't remember a great bit of detail. We did look at it, we flagged it. It's like, wow, wonder whenever we moved from the focus area 4 to drafting a small area plan, and then what morphed, as Maria mentioned, as a companion document to that, the form-based guidance plan. we looked at that property and said, well, this is actually the only sizable vacant piece of property within the area. But I think what ultimately we decided to leave it out is like, okay, well, we've got a substantial enough area here that we've looked at with the regulating plan, which does include that mix of uses, Jimmy, even though the small area plan mentioned geographically where to look at the mixed-use development. Block F was specifically tabbed for those type of uses, but the demarcation line was drawn there. And I think, too, maybe another reason to just move past and leave it out was we felt comfortable with the safeguards of the property being within the historic district, that there were another level of scrutiny that would have had to take place architecturally.
Yeah.
Microphone? Nope. Push the button until it stays green. There you go.
Yeah, I guess my thing is, the decision was made at that point. If we're talking about rezoning, what's changed? I'm not saying the rezoning's a bad thing. I'm just saying, if you are doing a rezoning, a decision was made, and the people who put this together, I know, spent many hours and a lot of hard work, a lot of discussion, a lot of heartache before I would agree to changing something. Again, what is the reason for that change after all the discussion a lot of smart people went through? What has changed?
And quite honestly, I don't, again, I said maybe 4 or 5 minutes worth of discussion. There wasn't a great deal of time spent on this particular property and why to pull it out. It's not that it was looked at very recently, 16 months or so ago when these plans were adopted, to say this property does not need to be located in here for a lot of reasons we discussed. And maybe just to answer the question, it's just timing's different. Now that there is an active interest to develop that property, maybe we missed an opportunity, maybe we didn't.
Any other questions for Maria or staff? Okay. At this point, we will now hear from the applicant, after which we will use the sign-up sheet to open up for public comments. So I would ask the applicant to please come forward, prepared to share anything. I believe there's a presentation to add to what staff has already shared. So feel free to stand or sit, introduce yourself, your address, please. You may want to be more comfortable sitting, or you can, yeah.
Oh, okay, got it.
We just trust you to be honest anyway.
Well, we got a whole team, so we'll do everyone at once.
Okay, sounds good.
I think these one. I think you guys can come up. Richard Vincent, Retson Companies, here on behalf of the applicant. Last name Vincent, V-I-N-C-E-N-T. Physical address 130 Short Road, Pinehurst.
Matt Williams, Retson Companies, physical address 275 Sand Hill Circle, Pinehurst.
Pete Bogle with Bogle Firm Architecture, 110 North Main Street, Salisbury.
Garrett Neal, Neal Civil Engineering, 419 Arbor Drive, Lexington, North Carolina.
Thank you.
Have a seat wherever convenient. We'll work through it. Thank you, Maria. And good afternoon, Planning Board and Chair.
You can take those microphones and sit back down, or you can stand. It's your choice.
I'll stand. Hopefully this is 2 minutes and I can be quick and get out of here. I thought I had my head wrapped around. I thought I had my head wrapped around that until you went through that, Maria, and I think I'm even more confused at the interplay of all of these. So I'll apologize in advance if we get some of the terms mixed up and guidelines. We thought it'd be helpful to give you the sort of the history, the project background, how we came to be in front of you here. And then we have 2 very simple presentations. Some of it's going to be redundant. Staff's presentation was pretty detailed, so we have some duplicated slides that we'll just brush over real quick. And then I'll get through that. If there's any questions, we brought the whole team here as far as Pete, architect. Many of you may be familiar with him. You know he's done a lot of work with the village. and projects within the village. And then obviously Garrett on the engineering side. Matt is the project manager, the lead on this site. We also have Julie on the team in the back. I don't think she'll be getting up to speak unless she wants to, but she's the project coordinator for this as well. Do we have the clicker control? Should I come get that? Okay, so project does not have a name yet. A little early in inception. Yeah, the background and the history was this was a piece of property that we had pursued for many, many years. Obviously, living in the historic district, being familiar with the property, using and frequenting the restaurants along that area. I have a small child up until 2 weeks ago, now it's children, and Pinehurst Pizza is the go-to spot. So we spent a lot of time on on McIntyre Corridor. So we had tried to contact this owner and purchase this property for many years. We got the opportunity in September last year, which is just a couple of months after the small area plan, I believe, was put in place by Village Council. I think that was sometime May. Someone may correct me on that. But the property was acquired by Bloom Precision Aesthetics in January. Retson, the applicant, us, were purchasing that property from Bloom. So that's the interplay. Retson is a local development, construction, and investment company. They'll be the landlord here, the developer, and the GC. So the background, as I said, is we've been trying to get our hands on this for years. When we did, we always knew that the zoning was neighborhood commercial. With any project as a developer, you always assess the sort of economic feasibility or the viability of the project. What's the most profitable route? What's going to make the most sense? At the time, just looking at it through the lens of neighborhood commercial, we thought, what's the most density we can get on here? And what's going to drive the highest rents? And we looked at what was by right under that neighborhood commercial designation, and it was medical and max density for medical. How much square foot could we get on here for a medical facility? And then the alternate was retail. It's such a high barriers to entry market in the village of Pinehurst, as we all know. There's just such a shortage of available space in properties like this. So the thought was, we were pretty certain we could find a national retailer to come here near and occupy this property. This was, again, late 23, just a couple of months after the form-based plan was put in place and adopted. When we started talking to staff about 8-9 months ago, the question came up, Mr. Duncan, the question you literally just asked was, how is this not in that plan? What was the reason? Was it left out? Was it forgotten? And we were trying to wrap our heads around that as well. Once we realized, and I won't speak for staff, but what we gleaned from those meetings was that staff was supportive of it having be incorporated, and staff can speak against that, but having it be incorporated into that plan, or at least us put forward a proposal to have that be considered. And so we pivoted from most of the by right uses under neighborhood commercial, and we started exploring the village place plan. That in itself has been a lot to wrap our heads around. And I think it is for you all, and I know this is the first project coming along. I know there's been one on the Highway 5 corridor, and I know there's just a lot to it. There's a lot of mechanics. I know there's a lot of things that were anticipated being put into place afterwards to give further clarity to that plan. So I guess we're all learning through it together here. I know we've gone through the slides, so I'll brush over. Maria touched on all this. We thought it would be helpful for you to see the corridor. I know almost all of you will be very familiar with this area, but until we really started investigating, we didn't realize how many little small businesses were here and the different uses of those businesses. And when we started investigating the small area plan and really leaning towards the feasibility of that model, we said, well, if it's a mixed-use project, this is a mixed-use corridor. We have car dealerships, we have a body shop, we have gas stations, we have recycling facilities, we have bars, we have taverns. At the time, there was a pest control service and exterminator service. There is a salon. We have, on the other road, there was an inspection company, there was office, there was pharmacy, there was apartments. There was density apartments on 3 stories, and there was low density sort of gambrel roof 8 or 9 apartments across the road from the site. So when we looked at it, from our perspective, it was a mixed-use corridor with so many different businesses playing different roles within the community. There's a zoomed-in version where you can see, and you can see how Clark Cadillac really wraps it. And then you can see, we don't have all the businesses listed there, but you can see how much is really going on in this little corridor. So fast forward, that's the site plan I know you've seen. Fast forward, meeting with staff, when we realized there was a real opportunity to come into the small area plan, we really started digging deep and saying, to us, what does a good-looking mixed-use product look like? Does it have a little bit of medical? Does it have a little bit of office, a little bit of retail? And ideally, we could put it all together on one site. So countless meetings with the staff. It's been about 8 months to get in front of you. There was a lot we had to do, as you can imagine, but we had to do it for you to fully understand what was happening here. And then countless meetings with staff, meetings with business owners within Pinehurst. I cannot tell you how many business owners within the core of the village or along this corridor that we've met, as well as residents through the community meeting, as well as residents who are not impacted by this or directly across the street, but live on adjacent streets or 2 or 3 roads down. And all of those meetings and the TRC with staff has really informed this project and how we ended up with, this concept plan that you see today. So to talk about the actual project, we're looking at 2 buildings, one larger, one smaller. Both buildings on the second floors will feature residential units, apartments, if you will. The one we anticipate having 6 units, the other having 4. And the larger building that fronts and faces McIntyre, we anticipate 6,500 square foot ground level retailer office. I say retailer office because we would love to see retail businesses here. We would love for this to create an opportunity for folks in the village core area who need more space, who don't have it, who have successful businesses that have been there for years but need a couple of hundred extra square feet. This would be an opportunity for them to grow. For some of those businesses that maybe wouldn't do as well moving away from the core and would prefer to stay where they're at with their current square footage, this may be more of a professional office environment where it's a real estate office or a CPA or someone who's going to have just a few clients come in and out a day, but it's more of a high-profile location and a physical presence within the village. The second building, smaller, anticipated a small medical office, and then again upstairs there's just those 4 units. Those would be smaller apartment units. Let me fast forward. This is looking at the site. It's always nice to give you sort of the street view. So across the road, you can see there's a single-family home that is looking from the apartments across. The site would be to the right out the screen. If you move over to the right top corner, that's the actual site looking across. Bottom left, you got 2-story apartments across from the site. And then looking catty corner from the site across, you can see a single-family home, which I believe a year or 2 came before us on HPC and was recently remodeled. That is looking directly at the site to the right. That's Clark Collision Center next to us, and you can see an example of the public parking that exists today. Now we're looking at where the site is. We're looking at the corner of the site, and we're looking down McCaskill towards the businesses, Maxie's, Taterbon, Pinehurst Pizza. Everything's on your right-hand side there. We talked about earlier all the existing businesses within the trade area already. So you can see our site and you can see what's directly across the street is residential apartments, 2-story. You can see the Village Studio Salon, the barbershop, Maxie's, restaurant, bar, tavern, Pinehurst Pizza, Taterbon. You got the recycling facilities for Pinehurst there, Clark Cadillac. The body shop is the Collision Center body shop's actually next to that. Then we've got a fitness center and performance. You got Pinehurst Taxi, we've got Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, which is a new business that took over, I believe, the backspace of that building. You got the apartments all the way in the back. So you really have a lot of different uses all going on in this little corridor. Here's another side of it looking across. So this is where the new, the Arboretum, I believe the Arboretum Apartments, but the apartments looking across the site with the Pinehurst Elementary School in the background. And then we just wanted to give you a snapshot, just have you fully understand all the existing businesses that operate in this little small area plan already. convenience gas, apartments. I do have times of operation on here, and we can get into that in the parking plan because that we wanted to put there in for a reason as we explain the parking and how we anticipate that working. Bottom corner, you can see we've got the home care, bridge center, even alternative medicine already in the trade area. Some more existing businesses. These all along the Rattlesnake Corridor. More restaurants, apartments, public service, and then there's even plumbing and retail showroom and plumbing. I'd call that probably light industrial. There's some more. So I don't want to belabor the point, but hopefully this shows you how much is going on there. And it was a surprise to me how many different businesses there are already operating here that would be considered mixed use. Maria touched on this. I won't go too hard on it, but right now, neighborhood commercial, the by right uses are on the left-hand side. There's a whole gambit there. And in doing this and in working, our hope is as we proceed with this project and hopefully you grant us the approval, I believe we're removing 18 of those uses that would be by right under neighborhood commercial that would be going away as we come into the village form-based district. That's what we have. If there's questions for me, we can handle them now, but we've also got several team members here that are itching to answer your questions as well, from the engineering side, the architectural side, and then also on the parking side. Maria, if you would kindly pull up that parking presentation. And I'm going to hand over on the parking presentation side to Matt Williams, the project manager.
Thank you, Richard. I'm just going to kind of get us into this, get us going on this, and then I'm going to bring Pete Bogle in to kind of speak to it a little bit more. But the idea here is that I know it was mentioned in the staff report that there wasn't a full grasp on the shared parking that exists on McIntyre currently, when it was being utilized, days of the week, that sort of thing. So we got some photos. Am I hitting the right button? Guess not. That's what I'm hitting. There we go. Again, apologies for the redundancies in some of these slides. But this is a good one that kind of shows you an aerial view of our proposed location, the existing shared parks that are there along McIntyre, and then the 10 additional on Kelly that we're proposing in the concept plan that's included in our application. So wanted to point that one out. And then, like I was mentioning, we were able to get some photos of this existing shared parking, and we were strategic with the timing of this. The idea was to get these during the week, not right at the start of peak hour traffic or right at the end, but somewhere in the middle ground there to show when people are going to work, that sort of thing, coming home from work, potentially going out to dinner. So what you'll see here is obviously the top left slide. That photo isn't much of anything because that's where our proposed new shared parking would go. But I think it's really important to key in on the McIntyre Road, the existing gravel parking there. 8:30 in the morning on a Wednesday, so people have either left for work or businesses are already opening and operational in the area, and we've got one vehicle out of 19 available spaces occupying that spot, and no little backstory on that vehicle that I won't necessarily dive into, but there's potential that wouldn't always be there like it is currently. And then in the bottom right, it's the opposite orientation, looking back up McIntyre towards our site to show that there's even, there's another vehicle, but a total of 2 vehicles out of all those spaces during the peak hour traffic in the morning. And then, apologies. All right. And so, again, in the afternoon, 4:45, so a little bit before people might be getting out of work, but also me living in this area, actually working at Maxey's for a number of years. I get my hair cut at the Village Barber Shop. I'm very familiar with this. I mean, this is typically a pretty busy time of the day, even on a weekday. But you can see very clearly here that while there are more vehicles than there were in the morning, there's still a pretty large number of vacant spaces available. And then we move into, this is working better for you, Richard. Move into Friday again, 8:30. One more vehicle in that bottom left southwest on McIntyre, and the same on the northeast on McIntyre slide. So not a whole lot going on in the morning, which would mean for our project, anything in that northern building, the office retail space would be able to utilize some of that parking, like we showed in the exhibits that were in your packet, those color-coded exhibits. And then again, that same Friday, 4:45 in the afternoon, a little bit more activity, as you can see, but surprisingly, not as much as I really anticipated. And I know this is kind of anecdotal and just based on personal experience, but there was live music on the patio at Maxey's that particular night that started at 5 o'clock, so we're 15 minutes prior to that. Without all that parking being utilized, which I think kind of lends itself to, it's easy to get wrapped up in this shared parking and how we are requesting that we be able to utilize some of it. But, let's not overlook the fact that all of these businesses through this corridor have their own off-street dedicated parking. So it's not like they're solely reliant upon this parking for their patrons and anybody visiting those businesses. So I know that was brought up, which is why we kind of wanted to show some of these pictures to give, again, that street view and some numbers. I mean, obviously this isn't a study over time or anything like that, but thought it would be beneficial. And more redundancy, so I think this is probably a good time to bring up Pete Bogle to kind of speak to some of the similar things. You don't need to mess with that.
Probably not. All right, so one thing that I wanted to really hit three pieces where the three conditions that were kind of highlighted in the red.
Pete, excuse me, before you get into it, can you just tell us a little more about your background, professional background, your experience?
Sure. I'm an architect out of Salisbury, North Carolina. I've done several projects in the Pinehurst area. One of the more notable ones is Village Chapel, the Heritage Hall addition there. Worked with Community Presbyterian Church here as well. Those two projects is where I got to know Retson. Retson's been using me as a consulting architect on projects here, Southern Pines, Pittsburgh, several other areas.
Thank you.
Good enough?
Yeah,
All right.
that's great.
Yep. So I also have a background on planning board. I was planning board chair in Rowan County for several years, so my hat's off to you for all
Let's
of that.
talk after.
I understand that side of the dais. So really on this, mixed use is a good use for this site. This is a transitional site between commercial, and there's one little piece in the corner that's beside of ours that is residential. Mixed-use residential commercial is an appropriate type of use in a conditional, in a rezoning application to help transition from the commercial to a residential area. This specific site, going through a conditional district rezoning, is a fantastic tool on the planning side because that allows you to put different types of limitations on what can be used on that site. The site is currently zoned as neighborhood commercial. It was left out of the form-based district, but don't think that it has less, don't think that it is more restrictive because it's neighborhood commercial. There's actually, as the slide Richard showed, there are more things that could be more impactful to the residential neighborhoods in the current zoning than would be with this form-based district, with the conditional district overlay that we're proposing. This is actually a move in the right steps to help protect those residential neighbors. So that piece being said, looking at the heights, the setbacks, and the parking. The height piece first, the form-based district actually has a specific building height definition in the form-based district. And that definition, if you look at what your small area plan says, is specifically from the average grade plane up to the eave, and specifically does not include the sloped roof. So our height following that definition is actually 25 feet. Now, we're only, 1.2 feet off from the maximum of 35 feet, so we're at 36.2, and the maximum is 35 feet even to the peak of our roof. And that's using the recipe that the form-based district actually puts in front of us with the sloped roof that it requires. If we cheat the slope just a little bit, no one would ever notice. It's not a perceptible difference, or if it even stayed at the 36.2 feet, it's still not perceptible with the hipped roofs that we're using especially. So that's the height piece. Setbacks, is there a slide in your presentation that has the site plan? Of the drawing? Perfect. So the first piece that's, that doesn't meet the form-based district guideline is the build to line that's on the corner of Kelly and McIntyre. That corner is a non-90-degree corner. So we actually started with the building at that 10 feet and even doing a splayed corner there. But that was really encumbering on that corner and getting closer and closer to that residential property. And because we have that required 15-foot buffer that goes along that property, along that side, we pulled the building back a little bit more than the 15 feet. That also gives us, that allows more area for more landscaping, more buffering between the building and that residential property, and gives us enough room to put the large backflow preventer that's going to be there in that corner to serve the fire suppression system that's going to be in that building. The other setback pieces there in the back corner, that southmost corner down there, we have that rear setback at 9 feet 10 inches at that least amount. That setback is called at 15 feet. That's the existing site just south of the property is already a commercial site owned by the car dealership. The first 22 feet of our building would be over that 15-foot line. If we took a 15-foot setback parallel to our property and overlaid it on that building that's angled in there, since it's at a different angle, it's only 22 feet that encumbers into that 15-foot setback. So, but laying this building in here like this allows us to do a more efficient parking lot to get all the cars into as tight of a space as we could. And as we come out near the street, which is the first place that anybody would be able to see whether we're meeting that setback or not, we're well above the 15-foot limit across there. We're actually, put that in my notes somewhere. We're more than that. We're 20-something feet, almost 30 feet. Oh, there it is, 34 feet 5 inches from the back property line to the corner of the back corner of the building there. So again, leaving a lot, as much of the vegetation, the existing vegetation as we can back in there, and doing the additional landscaping as well. And then the parking, I just wanted to go quickly through how we did. I know you have a sheet that's in your packet that looks like this. It has the parking calculations on it. This one talks about shared parking. Shared parking is actually a great strategy that a lot of planning boards, a lot of planning departments use to keep from creating more impervious surfaces than are necessary. Shared parking in this instance, especially with mixed-use development. Since the nature of mixed-use development with residential and businesses, the residents and the businesses are using these parking spaces at differing times of the day and through the week. That means that we have shared parking opportunities instead of requiring all of the parking for the residential and all of the parking for the businesses to be, there and structured and paved. So what we've done in this layout, we have the total required parking at the top, and you'll see the total required following the ordinance guidelines is 59 spaces. The required shared parking after hours and weekends assumes that this is during the times that the apartments would be using the site more and the businesses would be using it less. So in that first one, after hours and weekends, we have 100% for the apartments and only 90%, 90% open, 10% for the medical and 50% for retail and professional services. When you run those numbers, then we come out to a total parking need of 33 spaces. On site, we're providing 26 spaces there in the middle, which means that we have 26 on site. We would need 7 additional spaces off site on the two sides. On McIntyre, we have 19. There are existing 19 spaces directly in front of our. I was going to talk about it right there. There's 19 spaces right in front of where we're looking at developing this project. On the Kelly Road side, we have two. Perfect. We have two different. All right, perfect. Thank you. We have two different potential layouts. One is angled parking. And this is above and beyond what the small area plan recommends for for streets with residential. But on this specific site, you'll see our property line is so far in from Kelly Road that we have plenty of room to do either angled or even 90-degree parking. 90-degree parking is a little excessive along there, so we're looking at angled parking. We can get up to 10 spaces. If we go back to the parallel parking, which your form-based district guidelines recommend parallel parking in this type of streetscape where there's residential and mixed use. We can add 6 parking spaces along Kelly. So we would prefer to add, there we go, we would prefer to add the angled parking, knowing that those are easier to get in and out of, and it nets us 4 more parking spaces in the shared use area. Going back to your chart here, so the after hours and weekends, 100% residential, 10% medical, 50% retail and business. We only need 7 off-street parking spaces net. The second piece down is the weekends and normal business hours. For that, we have 100% of the medical parking. We have 100% of the retail and professional services, but our apartments, we've dropped back to 50%. With that layout, we need a total of 49 spaces. Again, on site, we've got 26. We need 23 spaces somewhere else. Even with that at its fullest, if we have parallel parking on Kelly, we have 2 additional shared spaces not being used on the McIntyre side. If we have the angled parking along Kelly, then we could have 6 additional spaces. Is that clear as mud? This is it is. It's there's no. Some of the communities that we work in have very specific guidelines on how to count shared parking between residential and business, between residential and business. There's not any, as far as there's not any in your ordinance. So these are using some of the numbers that we've used in other areas to come to these reasonable expectations of shared parking. So, and I'm available for questions.
Thank
Do
you.
you have some now, or?
Well, if there's anybody else to present from the applicant, we'll let that happen, and then I'll allow the board to ask any questions of anybody at one time. Or is that?
I have a feeling we're going to be coming up and down a little bit here, so.
Okay. Okay. So before I ask the board, I do want to say thank you for the thorough presentation. I think I followed it pretty mostly, and yeah, appreciate your attention to detail. So do any of the, while we're still in the public hearing, do any of the members of the board have direct questions for any members of the applicant's team that have shared specific to any of the points they have made that, and I may note, specifically relevant to their presentation?
I guess I'll start easily. First, I only see 10 spaces for residential, and there's 20 units. Is that correct? Or 20 bedrooms? And only 10 are dedicated to residential? So that seems, at least on your map, that's what it shows.
Louise, can you pull the microphone a little closer?
So that we have, so right now, what we've had to design around is number of bedrooms. And we are looking at 12 bedrooms in one and 8 bedrooms in the other. So that's the number. So in the top required parking, under dwellings mixed use, 12 bedrooms equals 12 parking spaces. And then the south building, dwelling mixed use, 8 bedrooms equals 8 parking spaces. That's included in the total of 59. So the very top line up here, required parking, if we don't use the shared parking, then that's the total number, the net number, or sorry, the gross number instead of the net number down here. So we are doing the 1 parking space per bedroom in the total number.
I wanted to know how you knew the specific uses, commercial office uses that were going to come in here to determine the square feet for the parking. Because you're very specific, and usually that's not all lined up. So I'm just kind of curious about how you did that.
Right, no, we use the number of parking spaces that are required per the different types of uses in the ordinance, whether it was retail or mixed use, or sorry, retail or professional services.
But you were very specific on saying there was going to be a medical office and different things, and they all require. I'm just curious, just want to know how you know exactly what's going to be in there.
Yeah, so the goal is, I think we have a good idea for the medical office for the back building. So obviously that needs to be parked the most aggressively with the most spaces. So we went ahead and did that. If that doesn't come to fruition, well, and it ends up being a retailer, we're going to be overparked even more so. Just understanding the area, knowing the area, we felt like the highest probability of users for that larger 6,500 square foot building would be a combination of retail and office users. So that's the same.
But it may not work out that way, what you think. So it could be less spaces or more spaces that you need.
Well, if it's either one of retail or office, that's what we're parking to. And if it ends up being right now, what is in front of you for approval, we wouldn't be able to put medical in that 6,500 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
We would only be able to place medical because we can only park the medical in that back rear building. So we are limiting ourselves to what can go in that front building based on the way it needs to be parked.
And my last concern is, sorry to be skipping around or whatever, but is the egress from Kelly Road into the parking lot. Did you consider entrances from McIntyre rather than Kelly? across from the residential. Of course, and also the parking along Kelly, but that's a whole nother issue. But having the ingress and egress right there in Kelly, and which means that you have commercial trash pickup, which means trash, vehicles will be coming in there and whatever else. I'm just curious about it.
Yeah, so that dumpster enclosure, I think our trash cans get picked up on a Wednesday here. It'd be the same trash truck that services a house that would service this place. Whether it's a truck that sits out front of our residential house on Kelly or the truck that comes in here, that's the same truck. As far as the consideration for the entrances, yes, we looked at all of them. Generally, when we do, our design standards will be to put the entrance on the less busy, the less frequented road, the road with the least amount of other curb cuts with opposing traffic or opposing turns. With all the other businesses and all the other curb cuts on McIntyre, it made sense. And again, DOT has looked at this plan. I know it's guidance from the village staff. It's the TRC process. It's Moore County. It's utilities. It's all these other agencies that have weighed in and given us feedback to get to this point. But from the get-go, we felt like that was the least invasive place to put the entrance and also create sufficient spacing from the intersection.
Form-based district actually pushes you to build out as much of the main street with building as possible.
Okay, that's all I have for right now.
Thanks, Louise. Other board members with questions for the applicant?
I've got a couple. Not to sound repetitive, but since you guys highlighted your problem with parking so much, I'll go ahead and ask a question with that. Just to clarify kind of what Louisa started with, you're counting bedrooms. Are those one-bedroom apartments?
Yet to be determined, but the way the parking ordinance is set up, we have to count per bedroom. Likely these are two-bedroom apartments or a mix of, but whether it's one bedroom, two bedroom, three bedroom, the ordinance requires parking per bedroom, which is smart.
So you're keeping your options open depending upon what decisions made on parking, it sounds like. Is that accurate?
Keeping the options open on the interior design, but the number of bedrooms can't change.
Okay. Regardless of the number of apartments that you have, let's just say there's one person for a two-bedroom apartment, and you've got 10 two-bedroom apartments, 20 bedrooms. Would you assume that each one of those tenants drives a car? I mean, are you assuming that each one's going to have a car?
So, yes, and that's what the ordinance parking would assume as well. So okay. The greatest, if they were all one-bedroom apartments, that would be the greatest the greatest likelihood of maximizing the number of cars per person.
20 cars.
Yes.
Okay. That, I mean, they reside there. If they don't work, they're there during the day. If they do work, they're there, after work hours.
Right.
Okay. Or work from home. Yeah. Okay. The parking that exists on McIntyre, who owns that property?
Village.
You plan on using it, right? Would you be in a shared requirement for maintenance of those parking spots when maintenance is required?
That's something that I know Alex and staff has.
Okay.
But from the onset, the option or the discussion has been that this development would pave those.
So you would pave them in asphalt or concrete? Okay. And then you'd keep those up for duration, or is that something that goes to the... Okay, that's something you're still working on. Okay, got it. Kelly Road, those proposed 10 diagonal, 6 parallel, who owns that property?
That is right-of-way parking as well.
Okay, so that's publicly owned property. Okay, so in the event that you get the approval to put your 6 or 10 spots there, you would pay to pave that and mark it appropriately and everything. and then maintenance of that would be determined later? Or determined at a certain point?
Question, I won't put Alex or Maria on the hot button here, but I think we would pay for the installation and the implementation and turn it over at a sufficient condition that was acceptable to the village, and they would be presumed that it would be maintained as village property, village right-of-way, just like it's handled in the village core for the parking areas that all the local businesses get to utilize. I'm not aware of any pro rata agreement where they all pay monthly dues of their pro rata share of the upkeep of that.
Okay.
Handled the same way, but that hasn't come up as of yet.
So they're really not dedicated parking spots for you then? They're public parking spots?
Yes.
Yeah,
correct.
so they're not all, you can't count those in your total numbers consistently?
We're requesting that we are,
Okay, yeah,
for the purposes of this.
okay, got it. All right.
Benefit to the community for that. So there's no sidewalk along Kelly right now. We also see the installation of that sidewalk being a benefit to the community, where the village could pick up the remainder of it and connect it to Dundee, so people would be able to walk up and down Kelly to connect to the sidewalk on Dundee. It's the same thing here for the parking spaces. We see that as a benefit of our installation, but it could be for the benefit of others.
Do you think that would be a, like I know the village has a lot of packed clay sidewalks, and then roots come up and they become hazardous for folks who walk in at night could trip. Do you think that would be like a packed clay sidewalk, or do you think that would be a concrete sidewalk?
These are specifically supposed to be concrete.
Okay. All right. Now, you know, I've sat on some of these when there's proposals that come in and there's no sidewalks planned, but, you know, there's an expectation that the taxpayers will pick up the bill for the sidewalks later. You know, it looks like you guys have already built that in, that you plan on putting a sidewalk there. That's great. Obviously, you can tell by my comments, you know, with the 20, you know, assuming that they're one-bedroom apartments, that's going to be your greatest return. You know, vice 2-bedroom or 3 bedrooms. You guys probably know that. You know, if there's 20 residents there, you know, that gives you 6 that are specifically for you, you know, and then you add in the other public spots. I don't really have a concern with the way you have your roofs pitched. If you went from a 10-12 to an 8-12, you'd probably, you know, be within your foot, you know, in a couple inches.
9.5, 12.
Yeah. And then don't have a concern with the setback because you are angled. It's not like a setback the whole way. It looks like just a small portion of that building is within that 15 feet setback. So, you know, addressing those 3 areas that you're asking a concession for, you know, I think the parking still needs to be kind of looked at. Thanks again for the detailed presentation, though.
And just to add some color, that second smaller building, that comment actually, and the intent when we encroach on that setback is really to move that building further away from the residential across the street, and that came out of the community meeting. That was something that we had originally had that building close to the street. They said, we'd love to create more of a vegetative buffer there, some landscaping, we'll slide it further down on the property. So that's really the big reason for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Bruce?
Well, that was my concern, was about since he was talking about the shared parking, that was my concern, because I was wondering how's that going to affect the other residents. And when you have emergency vehicles coming in there, you got your fire department, you maybe have a family that has visitors, and the traffic coming there, particularly associates, that is near that school traffic that comes through there too. Because I know they circle around down through there when they come in to the school, and then you're going to have maintenance and for the homes. You may have to have somebody, the people who come in to maintain the homes, the residents. You got working on the homes and things like that, so you're going to have some parking for them.
When you and forgive me, but the clarity, Mrs. Henry, that the question is the maintenance of the apartments?
Well, the people that come in,
yeah.
like for instance, if you got some work that needs to be done, and the vehicles that come in for different works in there, if you consider the space that you'd have to have for those extra vehicles that would be coming.
Yeah. So this is just under a 3/4 acre lot. There are a lot of, and I'm going to do my best to answer your question. There's a lot of 3/4 acre lots, especially in the old part of town. A lot of them have substantially more vegetation, trees, more maintenance, more sod, more grass. I anticipate the maintenance of this, whether it's yard maintenance, to be comparable or maybe even less on a routine basis than a large residential property with decorative rose bushes and beds. And so I would imagine your typical landscape crew that comes once a week or once every 2 weeks to maintain would be similar to here.
You're adding some residents too.
Yes, but the maintenance would just be for the exterior. There's no interior from the yard maintenance side. There wouldn't be anything related to the apartments. They just take care of the exterior. Those apartments would be, rental units, presumably. To answer the question on the school, the pictures we took were 8:30. It was last Wednesday and last Friday. That was 8:30 in the morning, 4:45 in the afternoon, same thing on Friday. That school traffic is 7 to 7:30. After that school traffic comes in, none of the businesses, whether it's a retail business or an office or the medical in the back, I won't speak here, but I don't think they're allowed to operate at 7 o'clock in the morning. So we don't anticipate that being any sort of conflict of traffic patterns. Most of those businesses in the village core, a lot of them are 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock sort of later starts. We anticipate the same thing because we anticipate similar users coming here to our project. So we believe, and then when the school is busy in pickup at, say 2 o'clock to 2:30, that's not peak hour, that's afternoon for these businesses. Again, we don't expect that sort of convergence of traffic and busyness along this corridor.
Bruce, did you have a question? Okay. Carol, did you have anything else? We'll deliberate more later, but yeah, anything directly for the applicant. Tom? Jimmy, have I come to you? Okay. To my right.
Oh, wait.
Oh, Sonia doesn't have anything. Okay, so.
I'll wait till after.
I have a couple questions. You noted the decision intention is to come into the Village Place form-based district, and how that restricts the uses for future. I guess, can you tell a little more on the why? I mean, it seems like it's good for the village, but can you explain the why a little more? Because you.
Is there an angle? Is that the question? I was part of those form-based district conversations. There were surveys. There were things that came to the house. There were Zoom meetings I participated in. I'm the chair of the HPC. I've served for 5.5 years. I know some of you I've met before through our volunteer work. We live here. We have friends here. And we shop here, we live here, we play here. So we really looked at it personally through our eyes. I know Matt has he worked at Maxey's for many years. A lot of our friends are the business owners on these corridors. A lot of our friends are the business owners and operators in the downtown village. It's a very closely knit side of the village. We frequently have block parties. We know all our neighbors. They know where we live. So a lot of that had to do with it, saying what is the kind of product that we want to leave, and we're going to have our sort of reputation, our name on it. What does that product need to look like? And as Pete said, from our side, it's not necessary to come into the Village Place district. None of this is necessary. We have a by right neighborhood commercial zoning, which is a very intensive zoning, but we want to come in because there is a benefit. We were part of that plan. We like the ideas. We participated in those surveys. We fully subscribe to the vision behind this Village Place plan. So we want to be a part of it. We're excited to be the first project on the docket and to sort of lead the way for others to follow. And I think this project here in this particular area would lead others along the corridor, other businesses to have the confidence to invest in their spaces, to remodel, to expand, and hopefully be the watershed for other projects like this to come in with the same sort of meaningful, attractive development criteria based on the Village Place plan. So that's the intent. It's a feasible project for us. There's other avenues, but we would really like to pursue this because at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a product that we can deliver and own that we'll be prouder of. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that is, thank you. It's a good answer. Okay, so if there are no other questions for the applicant, it looks like we should keep the public hearing open unless staff thinks we should close it. That way we can continue to ask questions of the applicant. Does that seem reasonable? We'll leave it open. Board's good with that? Okay, thank you, Richard. As we move into public comments, oh, could somebody bring me the sign-in sheets for the public comments? Thank you. Thanks, guys. A couple of items for members of the public to consider from us, the Planning and Zoning Board. One, your input is valuable and expected. There's a reason there's a public hearing associated with conditional rezoning applications. So you're encouraged to share. As it was noted by staff, this is a legislative review process, so we take into consideration the requirements in all of the governing documents of the village, and then also work with the applicant to agree on conditions that are favorable to the community, so your input is important. And what you say today is heard by this board, by staff, as well as by village council. So your input is important. And regardless of the result of our decision today, your input as a public still affects the nature of what the applicant is going to submit to the village council. So they have heard your input in public meetings, but anything you share today is also going to help them further develop their project if it moves forward. That being said, if somebody wishes to speak that's not signed up, we will make that offer at the end. It's a lot farther walk to get up here. Okay, so moving to public comments, the first name on the list is Don Mead. If you'd come forward to the microphone, please say your name and address and speak clearly if you would.
I never have a problem with anybody hearing my voice. I'm a former Marine Corps officer, so that'll work out great. So, well, thank you for letting me have an opportunity to make some statements. I live at 100 Kelly Road. Been here about 9 years. Love Pinehurst. Never going away. My kids won't let me leave. So, I'm also, just to let everybody know, I'm also a builder developer. I'm residential nut. Gotta love these commercial guys. They dress a lot better than we do. So, and I just had a couple points. I'm undecided right now because I believe it's good, positive growth is great for a neighborhood in the village. If I had a concern, it's on the parking, and I don't have the expertise of the engineers and all about the numbers, but I do know the pictures and all that were taken as far as like at the corners and all. My concern is Kelly Road is really busy, and it's right around school time when all the folks are bringing the kids in. There's kids walking down the road. This is more from a personal side and maybe than a business side. That's a concern to me. With the 10 spots or 6 spots or whatever, that flow of traffic is heading down towards the elementary school, and it's 7:15 the first bell goes off, 7:30 and it gets busy. So I think that's something that needs to be taken into consideration as far as how the parking pattern works, but that would be, from my aspect, something we need to look at, and also the foot traffic with the kids walking to school. I don't know if a traffic study was done at different times of the day. You probably do. You guys are way ahead of me. I used to do them. But at certain times of the day, interacting with the elementary school, with the new elementary school being built as large as it is, it's got more and more students coming in, a lot of a lot of people that don't like to use the school bus. So, on-street parking. As that on-street parking wraps around, how much of that, because it gets busy at night, which is good, I'm all for it. But as it wraps around, how much of that is going to be wrapping around into the residential district, residential side of the properties, from Maxie's, which I love to watch the football games there and all that activity going on, but how much of that is wrapping around is going to affect it. I'll leave it up to you guys whether 1.2 feet above the code is good or not. That's your guys' call. So, setbacks questions were answered for me. Access to McIntyre, it seems the logical way to go out. I don't know how it affects your guys' parking. I know it does. Based on how you would lay out your building on that other side and bring it out towards where most of the commercial traffic's coming to, versus putting it on the residential. So remember, I live on Kelly Road, so I'm going to probably be on the residential side of all this stuff. One final note I found out about the sidewalk. If a sidewalk goes in with the buffer and all, every other sidewalk I see in that part of Pinehurst is brick. Why concrete? That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mead. Next name on the list is Kelly Nelson.
Hi, good evening. Kelly Nelson. I live at 125 Kelly Road, right directly across the street from where the entrance, the parking entrance would be for this particular building. I'm not against, building up over there and having shops and restaurants across the street from me. I love walking to Maxie's and the pizza place and everything, so that's not a problem. But like Dawn, I do have a problem with the parking on Kelly Road. Again, the traffic in the afternoon for the pickup for the students. Sometimes I have to wait. Well, I always have to go around the Cadillac dealership to come into my driveway that way, and sometimes I have to wait in that traffic that way. I can never coming this way from Kelly Road because the traffic is so bad. And I know that would impact any businesses, residentials coming in and out of where the parking lot is located now. Not so much the parking on Kelly Road, but the parking lot itself. I know that the trash collection and all that's going to be directly across the street from my living room. All the residents and people that are leaving the businesses, their lights are going to be coming right out and shining right into my living room and bedroom off of Kelly Road. I would like the location of the parking to be on McIntyre, where that comes in on the back of McIntyre that way. So everything can go out McIntyre and not come out Kelly Road, where it's going to be shining into homes, people's homes, constantly. This is, I know it's a combo property where it's residence and commercial, which, like I said, is great. But the frontage should be, I would really like it to be on McIntyre, where all the other businesses are, and not on Kelly Road. And like Dawn said also, there's a lot of kids that do walk. Mothers and fathers pick up their kids, and I'm always seeing them walk down Kelly Road. There is no sidewalk, but they're always walking hand in hand past my house, and that could be detrimental to them. There's tons of golf carts that go up and down Kelly Road because it's so accessible. It shouldn't overwhelm the parking. The parking on Kelly Road would be, in my opinion, would be overwhelming to the 4 houses that are there and to the elementary school. I know that Richard and his team have looked at another plan. The homeowner that we bought the house from has like 30-some years in architecture and landscape experience. And he came, before we actually moved in July, he came to one of the first meetings and did a different plan for Richard and his team to consider coming in off of McIntyre, where the main parking for those two buildings would be off of McIntyre. So we know it can be done. Whether it's done or not, it will be up to you guys. And like I said before, you know, I'm not against something going in there. I'm just against where the parking is going to be coming out, shining directly into my house, and the parking on Kelly. And I know that Richard is part of the neighborhood, and I can't wait to get to know you better. But I think if he lived directly across from that building, he wouldn't be happy with that either. So, thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. That's everybody that has signed up to speak. Is there anybody else present who would like to speak at this time? This is the time. Okay. Well, we will keep, as we said, keep the public hearing open, and at this point move into board deliberation. Yes, Jimmy.
Matt, I do have one question for Richard, since
Sure,
after
we can.
listening to this. So Richard, has there been, and I realize there's nothing you can do, people coming out at night from the residences about the headlights for the lighting, but has anyone done a lighting study as far as the lights in the parking lot, lights possibly on the outside of the building at night, things like that that could disturb the neighbors? I mean, I live in the village as well, and I cannot stand the street lights we have, much less if there was more brought in. Just wondering if a study has been done for that.
As far as like a photometric study or plan, no. You know, most of that's actually dictated by, I would say, the ordinance and what we're required to light. So that piece of it's really dictated to us. I did, with meeting Mike, we did commit to do everything we could and to work with the village. So if the village does require certain lighting plans, we would do everything we can to soften the lighting on those two short sides of the building that face Kelly. And you can take this exact plan and flip it 90 degrees and have the entrance face McCaskill, but from our perspective, that is far more burdensome to have the back of a long building up against Kelly Road. We designed this to try and be as minimal impact to Kelly Road as possible. Even with the parking spaces, originally we had them at 90 degree, but we felt when the cars come out 90 degree, that light would be shining directly across the road. By doing it diagonal, we feel like the turn radius of the vehicles, that's a much softer, less direct light coming straight across the road. There's only so much we can do to mitigate that, yeah. And that would be an issue whether we were in the neighborhood commercial. If we were in neighborhood commercial, no one would see this plan.
Sure. Yep, okay.
So between the landscaping, and I fully understand it, between the landscaping and the photometric piece, we will do everything we can to soften the impact across the street for the local residents as much as we can. Yep. Garrett.
Just to add on to that for Richard, if I may. I'm Garrett. I'm the new guy to the village, so but glad to be before you tonight.
Sorry, remind us, Garrett, your background. Yeah.
Civil engineering, mixed-use projects at High Point University, most notably recently throughout Greensboro and the Triad. One thing, headlight pollution has been discussed. More of a technical design element that we plan to incorporate will be on the driveway apron. ADA will allow a max of 5% without a handrail, so which is 1 foot vertical change every 20 feet. So you think approximately the length of a car is 20 feet. We plan to angle the headlights downward to try to combat some of that headlight pollution.
So you're talking about as the cars would be leaving there's a kind of a slope on the parking lot.
That's correct. Yeah, so ideally the headlights wouldn't be shining directly into windows. I mean, upward or even straight, they would be angled minorly down.
Yeah.
But you think the base of a house rather than directly into someone's living room.
Right. Okay, well, so now I have a question about that. So how difficult is that to do, knowing that the parking lot actually slopes the other way towards the dumpster for drainage?
Sure, so you know, it actually works well. That was a lot of the thought behind putting the stormwater control device at the back. So a lot of times you would pitch up from a road's crown generally, or super elevated, So runoff will likely be coming that way. It will enter a natural swale to mitigate water running from Kelly into our private stormwater device, not to overload that control measure. So it would work nicely from a design standpoint.
Thank you. Okay, so this, yes, ma'am, go ahead. Well, as you're turning your microphone on, which I think it's still off, it's red. So this is the time for the board to consider what we've heard from staff, from the applicant, from the citizens. As Paul kind of did a little bit already, kind of sharing some of your thoughts on the conditions. As we're deliberating, we're moving towards, are we making a motion today? Do we need more information? Staff has given you template motions consistent with what was in the presentation, so consider that as we're deliberating. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'll make my comments now, thank you. I appreciate the landowner trying to do something nice in that area. I have a history of 2 Pinehurst since 1960, so I do know what was there and why those little businesses are there. Going to the history, but I do have a real concern about the parking on Kelly. I have driven that block probably 20 times, different days since all this has come up, and I am concerned. It will not look like the neighborhood part. It will look more like a commercial part. We can see that with the apartments in the corner. If there is a possible way, and I can sympathize with the homeowners in the school and down the block from Kelly with these cars on Kelly. If there's a possible way you could go out on McIntyre, I think it would be a lot safer because that corner is going to be very busy and those cars coming in and out from those apartments. And it's not that far from the corner. I think it's a real concern to me.
Yeah, one thing we have to consider in that is in the small area plan, McIntyre is a road, I mean, a corner lot requires frontage on both roads. So the current architectural renderings show basically a frontage type on both those corners, on both McIntyre and Kelly. But it seems like if we're bringing it into the small area, we can look and see, but it seems like McIntyre is the road that the small area would want the major frontage. But do you guys speak to that?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, the charrettes or the drawings they have, I don't know if that's reflective of what they're doing, but it certainly would be a contributing, positive feature, there. Maybe a little out of size with the stuff that's across the street, but still, I think it would be difficult. The two concerns from the two neighbors across the street, I mean, obviously, I think their primary concern was headlights. I appreciate the, pitching the lights or the headlights, down until obviously you hit the surface of the street. You're gonna, flag someone's house with their headlights on the way. But they don't know what the vegetation is there. I drove around it, but didn't notice that or thought about that. But you could do some of the masking with some vegetation. Both on both sides of the road. Something to consider. Obviously, property owners would have a big say in that, obviously. But yeah, with the scope and size and the restrictions, to try to access Kelly Road, or McIntyre, excuse me, would be almost prohibitive, and I'm not sure if you even want to do that. Because that's where you want people walking. That's where you want the downtown feel and everything. And I don't know if you want dumping, 26 cars, or, parking lot worth of cars in and out of there routinely.
So Matt, I also want to bring up, great presentation. I do think it is a plus. And it is the first one that we're doing for the village. But because it's the first one, this could set a precedent on all future ones, any decisions we make. So I hesitate to veer too far from what is stated in the small area plan and in the form-based guidance, even with, what to the height of the buildings comes up, even to the setback. I think we need to discuss that because, again, we are setting that precedent. But the other thing is we're talking about parking. It is very clear in the small area plan, the preferred parking is parallel parking on the streetscapes. And every example that they give shows parallel parking in front of buildings. So once again, I think this is an excellent use of that property. Again, I walk my dog by there probably 3 or 4 times a week, so I think it would be great. But I really hesitate on voting for anything that's going to stray too far, again, from what a lot of people put a lot of effort and discussion in coming up with these standards, especially on this first one.
Well said.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Jimmy. Once they build it, though, you better bring your little doggy bags to pick up from your dog. But I would agree with you, but I almost look like Kelly Road is almost that. I'm not advocating diagonal parking. As a matter of fact, I'm not advocating any parking or not. I'm neutral there. But I'm almost looking like that road's like non-contributing to the small area plan, if you will, if that makes sense. Just because you're trying to focus in towards McIntyre, just because of what we've already mentioned, Maxie's, Tater Barn, barbershops, and stuff like that. That's kind of the focused area. Every building needs a back, right? Well, it's not the back of the building. The back of the building is facing the parking lot. But when I look at the design and what's around it, I kind of view this as kind of like the back of the lot, if you will.
Yeah, Paul, and I agree until you put this on that lot. That's when that makes Kelly Road an integral part, and if we are touting that they're going to be putting a sidewalk on Kelly Road and possibly the village continuing that to Dundee up to the school, now that does make Kelly one of those integral parts, tying them, because there's not a sidewalk on that side of McCaskill. The sidewalk is on the other side, which, God, I don't want to open this can of worms, but that brings up, is there going to be a crosswalk across from Kelly going over to the sidewalk on the other side of McCaskill? Again, I agree with you as it sits now, but I do think that dynamic changes if this gets approved and this goes in. I do think it changes the dynamic of Kelly.
Well, and I think the proposal, they've already, well, I don't want to assume this, but I got the impression that those 10 spots or 6 have already been added into their account. So if you would take that away, then what are the impacts?
Well, on site, they've got 26 parking spots,
And
including the 2 handicapped. So.
Yeah, and I think, that's why I was trying to drive into, are these 2-bedroom places? Now we're down to 10 cars. If they're 1-bedroom places, which that's where you maximize your ROI, now you got 20 cars. If they'd be 2-bedroom places, I would have been ready to slap the table and say, I'm good. We don't even need to talk about parking. Me, not anyone else, but, but just worst case, there's 20 full-time cars in those parking spots.
What they said in the presentation was in the first building, 6 residential units and the other 4, which got them to 2 bedrooms per unit, 20. But would the number of bedrooms be tied to an approval, or would it be the parking spots associated with those number of bedrooms? I'm sorry, would the number of dwelling units be tied to the approval, or is it just the number of parking spots tied to bedrooms? Does that make sense? It's parking spots. So they would have the room to decide after approval whether or not to go with 2-bedroom or 1-bedroom units.
That could be a condition that could be negotiated, either one of those topics.
Yeah, and part of the issue on setting precedent, this is a conditional zoning, and the whole small area plan is conditional zoning. So it's someplace it was intended, and conditional zoning means negotiation between the municipality and the applicant. So I'm not sure how you can set a precedent in conditional zoning, because conditional zoning just kind of, by its very nature, allows for modifications here and there. Now, they're agreed to modifications. I'm not saying that. In fact, my understanding is that both parties have to agree to that particular, that condition, or it doesn't apply. So we could say one thing and you could say, no, I don't like that, and okay, poof, it's gone, or vice versa. So I'm not sure I understand how you could set a condition, precedent in a conditional zoning, because by nature it's all over the place. You're allowed to change almost anything and everything in conditional. There is no real specifics to it. So I'm not sure I understand the setting of precedent.
Yes, I'm looking at, this thing was written to drive consistency for new development in the Village Place. So I do think, and maybe precedent is the wrong word, but I think you need to stick as close as you can to what is in that plan
I would
to
agree with that.
drive that consistency on down.
I'm not arguing that we should stay as close as we can, but I think it's hard. My point is you can't arbitrarily say that, well, we got to follow everything in this.
Sure.
So you got to be careful with that, because there's other ramifications if you do those.
So,
and I won't go into those.
Of the conditions that are offered on the table, the ones that are written, not including any we may come up with creatively, the parking, we've got some setback variations. We've also got some where the setback is greater, but it does seem like the parking is the most significant item that we all have mentioned. So a couple of things I want to note from the small area plan. I think these were said, but so the small area plan prefers on-site parking. And actually the nature of this layout with the parking behind the building or between these two buildings on this site is very consistent. The discrepancy is we've got not the same number of parking spots for the density of the development. Small area plan also, as was said, I think by Maria, envisioned a core parking area. Well, we're not building out. We're not building from the core out. We're coming out and going in. So, I guess I'm saying this to give consideration to the 59 that is required based on density, according to the PDO. It's an estimate, but it is a number to help us have something, right? So at some point you're going to have all those residents full, and you're going to have people shopping, and you may have that much frequency for parking. At other times you may not, and it may be lower. So it's a number to give us. But the question is, as we consider that condition, how do we feel about the offer of on-site parking versus the on-street parking, use of existing on-street parking plus new on-street parking? If I'm pulling what I'm hearing, maybe it seems like on Kelly Road, we're hesitant to feel good about additional parking on Kelly Road. Does anybody want to add some color to that road first, and then we can move from there?
My concern continues to be Kelly Road, that both the parking spots and the entrance. It will change. I didn't know the impact of the schools until I heard it from two people and kids walking down the street or whatever. But this will change the character of Kelly Road. It's not, it will. For a commercial parking lot to empty onto there in that particular area is going to have a major impact on it. And school kids walking through there, that's just one whole other thing to consider. And I just think it's a negative, that's all.
Okay, no, that's.
You're going to have, anytime you put a commercial of any kind on one side of a street and residential on the other side of the street, you're going to have a conflict of that very nature that you're talking about now. I mean, you can't, where do you draw the line? Okay, so we're going to rezone this all residential? No, we can't do that because it's currently already commercial, and we're going to just redefine some of the commercial. So you're always going to have a conflict.
Yes.
Anytime you put one side by the other.
But
I don't know anywhere there any way you can get around doing that conflict.
Well, because McIntyre is a commercial roadway for the
I
most
agree.
part. And so it seems to me that that's where the entrance to this parking lot should be. It's also going to be the place that I guess is going to be signage for the use of this building. So I don't know, you're going to have to direct traffic all the way behind that somehow with signage. But McIntyre is the commercial street, and that's the one that should take the brunt of, development.
I think what's unfortunate here is there's some unknowns. If they were knowns, we could probably get through this. And I think the unknown is the residential density. Every apartment will have one car. I'm just going to make that assumption, for planning. Okay, so if you have 20 apartments, it's 20 cars. If you have 10 apartments, it's 10 cars. If you have, if Renton owns 26 spots and they have 20 residents, who we've already made the assumption it's 20 cars, there's 6 spots that they have, and then the other clients, customers need to go find other spots. So another assumption is we need parking on Kelly Road, because we're talking about, Kelly Road and parking. Is there an alternative? I go back to if I remember the form-based codes, they had parking designs that were parallel, but on the street side, it also was kind of curved with some vegetation.
Mhm.
Okay, they're going to lose the village. It's not their spot. The village will lose some spots, but it mitigates some of the commercial feel transition to residential. If that's being understood, if I'm explaining that correctly to be understood by everybody, that could be a proposal to kind of soften the transition from a commercial to residential, and it may help mitigate because now you have another layer of vegetation as the headlights turn into the two individuals that were here earlier, to soften some of that. I mean, I'm just kind of looking for alternatives. I mean, I like this. This is kind of what we've all decided on moving towards to these small area plans. It appears as though they're adhering closely to the form-based code stuff that we've all proposed. I'm just looking at ways to, come up with solutions that are agreeable to the applicant, and we can, move this one along.
Well, I think that's the right sentiment. Oh, Carol, go ahead.
One other thing, I'm thinking, okay, you got a medical staff. Okay, what you got arranged for your staff parking? All right, you've got maybe other workers that come in. Where are your parking spaces?
They're in the front of that
A
building.
lot of
yeah.
parking to consider, because if you're putting in a medical facility, you got workers. So where are they gonna park? Where are they gonna park? Well, I'm just thinking of some of the other things that maybe, if we make a decision, if we don't make a decision, still I want them to put that under consideration.
Yeah, good point. So as we think about, we feel like this is a good presentation. There's a lot that's consistent with the small area plan, but there are some things that we just need some help on, and we think before we would move towards a motion, maybe need some more information. As we think about parking, and I might ask you to come up, Richard. Shared parking was brought up. What have you guys done? I mean, I understand the calculation, but in terms of working with staff, what has been done to talk about shared parking agreements, or whether that's with the village or with other places in the area that may have parking, because I think where we are is we see this number of spaces that you've got on site, and we're not totally comfortable with Kelly, but we do feel like there needs to be some more parking, and obviously the minimum based on the ordinance is 59, so we haven't said that's the number, but we do need to understand how we would look at more parking.
I've got one more input too on the parking issue. And correct me, it's commercial on the first floor of the north building, is that correct?
That's correct.
So it'd be little stores, shops, whatever else might be in there is considered commercial. Well, I got just common sense a little bit. People are going to park in front of where they want to go, whether it's shared parking or not. They're going to use those parking spots unless you put a fence between the parking spot and the building. They're going to use them anyway. Or you're somehow going to have to control the use of those, and I'm not sure how you would control the use of them other than short of a fence or something. So people are going to park as close as they can get to where they want to go. Whether you put in an administrative block or not, at this point, I'd, Paul, if I was going to, let's say one's a pizza shop and I want to stop and pick up my pizza, I'm going to pull up in front of the pizza shop if there's an open parking spot there, and I think most people would.
Well, there can't be a pizza shop there because there's one right down the street. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I know. Because
but so to your point then, the parking behind the building would be, in using that line of thinking, mostly the residential as well as the staff for the medical building in the back. So to you, Richard.
Yeah, and I know we've talked 20 minutes of parking is definitely the challenge here. If we're required 59, correct me if I'm wrong, Maria, but you all could determine what the number is for parking. So there's a solution there. We're trying to meet the 59. The front of this building, the large building that faces McCaskill, that's the front. That building faces McCaskill. That's the retail store.
McIntyre.
McIntyre, beg your pardon. That's the retail storefront. That's the face of the building. So we anticipate clients, patrons, customers will be parking and utilizing that parking, hopping out of their car, going onto the new sidewalk and entering the storefront. That's the front of the building. The employees who would work in those spaces, those small shops, whatever they were, could be a little Edward Jones, a tax guy, a real estate office. They're not having 15 people in their building. Some people may only have 5 a day come into their office if it's more of an office use. But those employees would park internal to the site. We anticipate those being retail office regular hours, like normal business hours that you'd expect in the village core. If that day sort of starts at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning, we expect and fully anticipate the majority of the residential users, not everyone because people work from home, but we anticipate the majority of residential users, the tenants, leaving to go to their place of employment. So we see that availability of parking opening up. The few places where we've deviated or requested concessions from the guidelines are in places that we feel like we've done our best to explain, but having that building up against McIntyre is a requirement of the guidelines. We tried to achieve that. Utilizing that parking at the front of the building, we tried to achieve that. The parallel parking that is really called out as the parking, the preference, I don't know if you can see it on your screens, but we have got a layout where we go from 10 parking spaces on Kelly to 6, and they're parallels, like the model you see in front of you there. That is fully plausible for us, but we would request you work with us on the 59, and if that count gets lowered, we're perfectly fine to do what you see in front, and if that's something that would be more palatable to the residents on Kelly, we'd be fine with that. The guidance we got when working on the small area plan was there were a lot of people that touched this plan. There was a lot of input, but everything in this plan is a negotiated settlement. So even if we felt that this was a preferential option, but you said, no, it needs to be vertical, well, that's the guidance we're going to take from it.
So to be able to use the parking on McIntyre, trying not to say McCaskill now, so the obvious thing to me is you've got other existing businesses there that are using that parking. And while you did demonstrate with the pictures, it's not full all the time. There are certainly times where those lots are full, and not knowing the nature of the business that are going to come in, we have to give consideration to that. So when we think about shared parking, one thing that might be helpful is, and I don't think we have anybody here from local businesses on McIntyre, but they're using those parking spots now. And what you're proposing is going to rely heavily on those spots, and more than the ones you've shown. I mean, you continue down past where you've highlighted blue, and any of those could potentially be used because they're walking distance, which is part of the vision of the small area. So I would be interested if the board would agree in trying to see some sort of cooperation or shared discussion with the local business owners on that street, because they're already there, and they're already relying on those. Now, the barber shop may not need nighttime parking, but there are some restaurants there. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, and we anticipate those businesses not being operational when those parking spaces are needed by Maxie's, Pinehurst Pizza, and whoever else is on that corridor.
Right, but you've got restaurant in the table of uses, so you could easily have some businesses that you couldn't need nighttime parking, right?
Yeah, and that's a true statement, but the likelihood of a 6,500 square foot restaurant over here is just not, it's not feasible. Right. When we say restaurant, we anticipate a coffee shop, a bagel shop, something small. We've spoken to many of the business owners on that corridor. I think we've also submitted letters in support of the application. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to review those, but a lot of the local business owners are excited about this because it would bring in additional traffic. They see the benefit of the parking. Right now, there's no, just imagine there's no parking on Kelly. I've fully seen this parking lot full at 9 o'clock on a Friday night when a band is playing at Maxie's. We've all seen that. But I haven't seen the cars bend the corner and run all the way down and park in the right-of-way along Kelly. So I know there was concern brought up. I haven't seen that yet. I don't know why, just because there's a parking space, people are now going to go and utilize it if they haven't needed it already. So because this is mixed use, we're parking this based on the parking requirements based on the use. But that's assuming everything comes together and is being utilized at one time. Right. In reality, we just do not see that happening. We don't believe that's plausible.
Well, I mean, that seems reasonable, but it also seems like those parking spots are at some point being used by local businesses. So it's not it seems reasonable to say, hey, we want to share these.
Absolutely.
So if you could get something from local businesses, I mean, I know this is some of what the PDO refers to, even though they're in the right-of-way, a statement from those businesses on that street agreeing to share use of that parking with all the consideration that you're saying would be worth a lot.
Yeah,
hey, Matt, let's bring up all this we're talking about, the parking on McIntyre and even any additional parking on Kelly. That's all on village property.
Correct.
Right. It's owned by the village. It's public parking, first come, first serve. So the only parking areas that is going to be dedicated that they are supplying are the 26 parking areas in the parking lot itself.
That's right.
Everything else is village parking places, first come, first serve. It doesn't matter what business, who owns it. If I decide I want my family to park down there one night instead of parking at my house, I mean, it's village parking.
That's a good point.
I have the same thing in front of my house. So I don't think we need the study as much as we do. Are we going to agree to give them credit for it?
Right.
Because it's not their parking area, it's the village parking. Our decision is, do we let them use it to give them credit to meet the plan?
Well,
we
right.
cannot, there is no way to know who's going to be using that parking. There's more control on the parking between the buildings and the 26 spaces that they are supplying, and that's the only thing that they're really supplying.
Yeah, so the question there, I guess, is the determination for that is either made based on the data they provide or based on the actual use, which, how does that go, Alex? I mean, Jimmy's obviously right, that's in the right-of-way, but could we, in the practical sense, is there still merit to getting the input of local business owners on that street who are primarily where that parking is used? It's not used by residential, I'm
Just for
assuming.
my own edification, Are all these businesses going to have entrances in the back? Do you anticipate that? And the entrances to the apartments, will they be off of the parking lot or on the street? Just curious.
Yeah, good question. All internal, internal to the site.
So you can't walk up in the front and get into, an office?
Yes, on the front building, the storefront, the face of the building, the main entrance to those units would be off McIntyre, but the employees would have a rear entrance where staff would come and open up and lock that door and close that door however they saw fit, and then they would go into their unit, and the storefront would face McIntyre.
Because the building in the back, their entrances would be on Kelly? I mean, that's where the front door would be?
No, just like you see it now, the entrance would be right where the parking is. That would be the face of the building. So it's basically a mirror image of the big building, and the entrance faces the same way as the larger building that faces.
So you would anticipate that building having more medical clinic and something like that rather than
Yeah, and-
eye-catching go past? And
Correct. And again, this is not 3,200 square feet. This is not primary care. It's not convenient care. This is not 15 patients an hour. This is
Doctor's
this could be nutrition based. This could be medical aesthetics. It could be something where there's 1 or 2 patients an hour. But we're meeting the 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet threshold. And another point to make, Pete just made a great point, but if the entrance was on McCaskill, we'd probably lose it's estimated we'd lose 4 to 5 parking spaces, possibly more. Sorry, McIntyre. We would lose 4 to 5 of the village's parking spaces, shifting that. It's actually having a reduction and doing the opposite of what we're trying to achieve here. The question about the shared agreement, the village giveth and taketh away. It's their parking space. They may come one day and say, we have an event for the Holly Arts Fest, and we're taking all that parking, no one's allowed to use it, and we are parking people here and shuttling into the village, and that we'd have to live by that. We don't own it. We're just asking for the allocation and the consideration of it to use it in our calculations for our project.
And it would be the same for any other
Correct.
business on that street. They would have to say, yep, well, guess what? It belongs to the village. It's not ours.
And that may happen at 2029 for the U.S. Open.
It could
so
be.
other tournaments. So.
Yep, well, yeah, that makes sense. So I'm looking at the clock. Board would like to maybe take a recess for 5 minutes and then come back since we've been at it for a little over 2 hours. Does that seem reasonable? Okay.
Yes to me.
We'll recess and return at 6:20.
Good. Thank you.
for the resumption of the meeting at 6:22. Okay, where we are. So to the board, we've got requested conditions, going back to where I was a few minutes ago, on permitted uses. You have those listed in the packet. Dimensional requirements, 4 different conditions, and then the parking, and then there was also a staff recommendation for a condition. Maria, can you remind me what that, I think it was number 11 in your presentation? We might have already considered that one, but I don't have that in my notes. There was one condition from staff recommended.
Just that was to provide information on the building design
yep.
and elements.
Okay. So before I get back to parking, we've talked about the setbacks. So we've got a max building height of 35. They're proposing 36.2. We've got the side corner lot, 10-foot build-to line. Theirs is actually greater. So the rear setback is reduced, which appears to be because of the angle of that building, the rear building on the site. And then the interior side setback, which they're exceeding. So I heard what Jimmy said earlier, but any issue just looking at the dimensional requirement conditions with those conditions as written? Yeah. I don't have an issue with the setback. Obviously, Jimmy. Yeah. Well, let's just poll, starting with Carol. Any issue with the setback? Okay. Sonia, are you okay with that?
I'm fine.
Louise, you're okay with those?
Setback heights, those things? Okay.
Yes, I can compromise on that. Once again, I'll say, I don't think we should veer too much when I look at a document, and this is in the PDO, not in one of the area plans, and it says more so on the height. If it says maximum height, that's a maximum height. It's not maximum plus or minus. That's a maximum height, and that's coming from the PDO. So the corner setback on that lot, do I think that is that big of a deal? But I do think we should push that consistency as much as we could, and I think building height is one of those things.
Okay, well, on Jimmy's behalf, I'll ask, it was mentioned a couple of times that the roof slope could be adjusted to accommodate, I don't know who's the best to speak to that, probably the architect.
So again, the building height definition in the form-based district is 35 feet maximum, and the definition of building height says from the average grade plane to the eave, not to the top. The village, the PDO, Village Pinehurst Development Ordinance, has a building height that defines it to the top. So they conflict with each other, but we're following the form-based district guidelines. So to the eave, we're at 25 feet.
Mm-hmm. The dimensional standards are in the PDO. So the 35 is in the PDO, which refers to the...
That's in the PDO, but the form-based district defines building height as...
Correct.
From the average grade plane to the underside of the eave, and specifically does not include the slope of the roof.
But also doesn't have a limit in there.
It does.
The small area plan
does. It does. It's 35 feet. That's the limit.
But that's listed in the table of uses. PDO.
Which, can you, Alex, can you?
It's probably something we just need to...
So the Village Place plan had a limit of 1 to 2 stories, which had a building height definition that Pete's referenced a few times. The PDO has a building height definition that is a different definition to the peak, and a dimensional standard of 35 feet and not stories.
But, okay, so Alex, isn't the PDO the regulating document?
It is the regulating document.
And the village plan is a guidance document?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's sit on the building height for a minute, but,
Building height, if it comes down to it and we need to stay 35 feet to the peak, we can do that if we're a touch under the 10 to 12 slope that's also part of the recipe of the village plan.
Yep.
So we can adjust one or the other, and honestly, from the viewer's standpoint on the sidewalk, nobody's going to know a difference.
yep, okay. Thank you, sir.
And just to remind everyone as well, I mean, conditional zoning, if there are changes to a building height, staff can approve a 10% adjustment on that as well. So this would be within that 10% adjustment. Again, it's already at the ceiling, no pun intended. We're past it, but just for that consideration for the,
Yep,
for the
thank
group.
you.
Can I ask one question? Just maybe to,
It's your last meeting, of course you can.
yeah, just to kind of flick this mouse turd and move on. But as you, as you designed it, knowing that you were above the 35, was there a reason just aesthetically that you went to that pitch? You know, and there's always, well, why did you do that? You know, well, it looked,
Yeah, so we started with the width and depth of the building to get the right size footprints on the site that can work with the parking and the setbacks and everything else. And then we followed the recipe of the Foreign Place District, who says we want the slope to be 10-12. Well, that's gives us the 35 point or 36.2.
okay, that's why you did, okay.
Yeah.
So they can.
So 9.5/12, you're at,
9.8 or whatever
Okay,
it is.
got it.
Exactly.
yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So then, let's do the next, before we get back to parking, permitted uses. Let's start down here with Carol again. Any issues or comments on the condition restricting the uses as listed under their condition to those?
No, I don't.
Bruce,
think-
you okay?
No issue?
Paul, it's on you.
None that are there. I think it's a better idea to restrict them.
Okay. Okay, so back to parking. So this is where we are. So we talked about Kelly Road. We've got 3 components of the parking as provided in the application. There's Kelly Road on street, there's McIntyre on street, and there's on-site between the 2 buildings. Let's talk about Kelly Road. And, okay. That was easy. Bruce, can you use your?
Use yours.
Microphone.
Hang in there.
Hang in there. Just push it once and it should go green.
Hold the
Push
little
it down,
thing.
yes, into this green, there it is.
There, hold it.
There you go.
Hold it.
Once it's green, you're good.
Okay, Paul, I'm calling you in.
I'm trying to get it to work. I think we can come up with a better idea, and maybe not use Kelly Road parking.
Paul?
I mean, I would agree with the applicant's assessment today. You know, there's, okay, you know, first of all, again, another unknown is how many people are going to live there, because that's going to drive density of vehicles. You know, best use for the properties across the street are probably not the buildings that are there today. So as they build this wonderful building and it, you know, attracts all kind of interest, someone's going to go in there and develop that. Okay, so when they have requirements for parking, are we going to allow them, do they have to be plus 19 to make up for a difference if we would allow a minus 19 now? So I look not at today, I look at the future, and I think that's what this board is inherently needs to do. So yeah, I still have reservations. I am not adverse to parking on the village spending, or, you know, going in there and parking there. It's already been pretty clear that, you know, the diagonal parking, the density probably won't work. Maybe there's another thing that we could do. I mentioned about the islands that we had in the form-based code designs. Maybe an alternative if you need a couple additional spots. But the traffic in the morning with the school and all that other stuff, that's unknown to me. So I really don't know what all the effects would be if you put even the parallel parking in there. So I don't, you know, so I think we're still in a, I mean, I would go back to the applicant, you know, maybe they looked at, you know, what if I didn't get Kelly Road? You know, what were my fallback positions? They may have a great suggestion and say, hey, here was Plan C. You know, I think it's going to meet our needs and desires.
Well said. Thank you, Paul.
I spent many hours, like most of us older members, on the small plan, and I think we need to be consistent with that. I really have a problem with Kelly Road being open.
Tom?
Good.
Where do you land on Kelly Road and the parking on Kelly?
What they have, I would recommend shared use of those parking spots, whether they're parallel or angled, either one. It would be the equivalent to what we do for the rest of the business owners on there. Those are shared spots. Had we had one of those, what would we say? They couldn't use them because of some reason. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Yep. Louise?
I don't know, the shared parking really bothers me, but that's an overall view of mine. I don't know, I have a few problems, and particularly the parking along Kelly Road and the general entrance along Kelly Road. Those are two big ones for me. And I also don't like not going by the strict law of the land for the height of the buildings, even though it's only a foot plus, it still does make a difference, so.
Okay, thank you. Jimmy?
So I go back to the parking they are providing is the 26 spaces that is in between the two buildings. I'm fine with taking credit for any of the shared parking that is owned by the village on village property, because that is no different than what we do in the village center for any other business in the village. So to me, that's kind of a moot point. The parking on Kelly Road, I can agree to it if it does go with the stated ideals, for lack of a better term, for the small area plans, which was anything in Village South was going to be parallel parking. And I do think that does make a difference on a road like Kelly Road that is residential, where you don't have cars sticking out, the backs of them sticking out in the lanes as people are going. So that part, but I guess as far as the taking credit for the shared parking, it's no different than anywhere else, any of the other businesses that we do in Pinehurst. So there's enough parking for the residents in the parking that they are supplying. So I don't see the big deal on the shared.
Okay, thank you. So we have, Richard, would you come to the mic? I'm sure would have a conversation. As we're thinking about what you've given us, overall, it seems like where the board is that we're not overall comfortable with the parking on Kelly Road. Some varying thoughts on that, but by and large, if it were to go to a vote, I think that's where we would be. We love your presentation. Again, you're the first one. You said watershed, so there's a force with that. Parking is one of the things we talked about when we were developing the small area plan, because you've got, how do you analyze all those businesses you looked at and how many parking spots they use? So I'm not going to, as a board, we're not going to ask you to do a parking study of the entire Village Place. But I do think we need to see more than what you've got in there on how the proposed potential uses for the building, particularly the commercial uses, would contribute to the overall parking in that area. If there's some comfort with shared parking, 59 there may be a number less than 59. I don't have a number to give you, this is what it is, but it would be beneficial if you could work with staff to come up with a plan that gives us more detail. And I know you can't predict the uses, but right now what we're looking at is a pretty big delta, and if we take away the parking on Kelly entirely, that doesn't get us any closer to the number required by the PDO based on the square footage for those buildings.
Ask a question to Alex. In the form-based district guideline, what is the suggested streetscape in a neighborhood, in a residential area? What does that look like? Is that something you can bring up? Or
We could pull up the recommendation of what a residential street cross-section would be.
Yep, using the form-based district guidelines.
You want to find it, Maria?
By Alex and Maria some time. I think that there was no guideline on how shared parking was to be calculated. So we worked through Teams meetings, in-person meetings, all of the like to come up with this solution. So if you back up from the PDO to the ITE manual, which is the kind of international building code standard for parking, it says, it breaks up this use requires this much parking and this use requires this much parking based on the trips per day. The PDO is a little more strict than that, but it also, when you look at a mixed-use project, it kind of exponentially increases that conservatism there's not one use. So if it's conservative by one use, when you keep multiplying that conservativeness over and over and over, it becomes even more conservative. And that has to be noted, like on many mixed-use projects. With the school, that's another kind of parking component. Circulation is a big deal. We can't really consider that as part of this parking plan. Looks like I've bought enough time.
Well, I mean,
there was a link on that last page.
it's
It was there.
it's parallel on-street parking.
It is. It is.
Just-
That's the answer. In the form-based district guideline, your form-based district guideline says in a residential area, you should have parallel parking on street. So,
As well as parking at the rear.
yeah, and so we're not going beyond or above what Village Place says. We're doing what it says to have those parallel spaces. The beyond and above was looking at doing the angled spaces since we had so much depth there.
The angled was also to compromise with headlight pollution and reduce conflicts. You can look at traffic study after traffic study. Parallel parking will have increased conflict when it's compared to angled parking. People can't parallel park, we see that.
Right, but I think this area, this street, Kelly Road, was not previously in the small area plan. So in looking at the rezoning here to put it in there, we're looking at now an existing residential street and on-site parking. And I think just as a board, I mean, I don't think we're going to be convinced today that parking on Kelly is a good idea. But what we're saying broadly is we do think what you've got is reasonable to a degree, but it doesn't give us the confidence to say the existing on-site on McIntyre parking plus your proposed parking on-site is enough to be reasonable. And honestly, like you said, you're the first one, so
That
we're
takes
open to
us to-
creative things, but more than what we've seen so far.
So that takes us then to what is the total number? What's the most reasonable total number? Instead of each individual use having its own calculations, how can we do the shared use?
Well, we're not going to give you a bottom-up number, get to 47, or, I mean, I'm not even going to say get to 59 as the hard stop. I think I would like to see what you've put in there, or we could see as a board what a little more support on. It's a square footage, right? It's a building. There's potential uses, but I think, I mean, today we're not comfortable with the parking as it is. So we would look to ask for some more information on that, help us be more specific to you, but if we were making a decision today, the parking is not satisfactory.
So our total, our worst-case total with the shared is weekends and normal business hours, weekdays and normal business hours, and that's 49. The 26 that are interior plus the 19 that are there in front of the building, shared to be used by anybody, plus the 6 that would be on Kelly is 2 more than that 49. So that's where we were coming to.
I appreciated what Jimmy said about, even every place they share public parking, right, to use commercial spaces. I think where you have 26 spots, you have 26 residents. That's how I'm looking at it, who live there full time, with 1-bedroom apartments. So that's just where I kind of got hung up on it. I was trying to be very flexible with it, but there's 6 spots that you have to use is how I look at it in my mind. Everything else is free game, so that's where my constraint was with the parking. If you had less density, then it, and you were able to articulate that, then yeah, I could have got over the Delta 19 pretty quickly.
So what do you have, or what do you think that you could work on that would help us feel better about the parking?
Well, I think from our perspective, and again, this is a negotiated settlement, right? What we got to weigh back in our mind is, okay, do we want to, is there an alternative plan? And as much as I want to accommodate for neighbors, there's a far more intensive plan that can be put on this property tomorrow, and no one will know about it. Again, that's not the intent, but there's only so much we can do, and we spent 8 months and feel like we've given this a really honest shake from every angle, talking to business owners along that corridor who have had no issue whatsoever with shared parking. And there's public notice, 2 opportunities for public notice periods, and there's not a person here. Right. And a lot of those people, will have them show up at the council stage. I think the clarity what we would need is if it sounds like the direction is, if the 19 can be considered in our full calc, and the 26 that we're bringing to the table internal to the site, it sounds like the primary heartburn for the planning board is any parking along Kelly. And if that's the position and there's no going around that, that's the piece we'll go back and consider and think about that and come back and say, hey, we can make it work or we can't make it work. But if that's the one piece, I think there's some things we can do on the apartments. Paul, Mr. Roberts, you mentioned the 26 units. We're looking at 6,500 square feet. 500 probably hallways on that first building. You got 6 1,000 square foot 2-bedroom apartments. The back building, you got 3,200 square feet. You got 4 single 1-bedroom apartments. If we came back and said, hey,
you had that opportunity to explain that. I thought you guys would have been able to neck that down.
Well, yes. At the end of the day, if that's what it comes down to from this meeting and we learn about these things, we can come back and maybe eradicate the parking on Kelly. But again, we didn't have clear direction saying that we could utilize the 19 parking spaces. So
understood.
I just never heard anything concrete. You said possibly, and it's the words that you use like that is that there's nothing to me that's not concrete, and I need more concrete. And then too, well, I just think I need more time just to sit and go and just 2 hours, but just sitting here and not having been able to go into depth with this personally. You've had maybe years or whatever it is that you've been working on it. So I just think, now personally, this is with me. I need clarity. I wouldn't give a definite answer because that's just not what I need.
Yeah, and please don't mistake the lack of guarantee is really just because I don't want to stand up here and tell you a lie and not be able to back it up 6 months from now.
Something's going to change.
We don't know who the users are. So what we're doing is we're trying to play within lanes that we get stuck with and we have to abide by. It may be all office users. It may be one single office user with 5 employees that takes the entire 6,500 square feet, and guess what? The impact of the shared parking is minimal. we don't know that. What we're baking on is sort of the more conservative, staying within the lanes and then working back. We fully expect to not be nearly as intensive on the parking as what we're showing today. But again, we want to make sure you have all the information to make the right decision.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you being conservative, because I think, that's what we all want to do here for the future.
Yeah.
I think what you said about Kelly, I mean, that's where we are, is we'd like to see what you could do without Kelly, and if it's looking at the residential differently, or looking at density, looking at your square footage numbers and making sure those, is there any room to adjust those? But these densities, the 1 per 200 and 300 square foot, I mean, those are the lanes that we have to work in, and if there's anything subjective beyond that, that's where shared kind of comes in the conversation. And I think we're comfortable looking at some shared use on McCaskill, McIntyre.
Yeah, that was my fault. And, the parking situation self-regulating. I mean, if anyone goes and eats at Nico, there's 5 parking spaces that are shared by probably a several thousand square foot restaurant, right? You go find the next available space.
Right.
You find a property that's not owned by the resort that has 26 dedicated parking. I don't know if that exists.
You're not wrong. The existing businesses, I mean, and they also run out of parking spaces.
Correct.
So
yes, I think if we can take the direction from tonight and come back and revisit this, but if the direction is we're comfortable with the 19 spaces, they're owned by the village controls them, but you can utilize them in your allocations and see what you can do to avoid the impact on Kelly and any parking spaces on Kelly, then that's the direction we would take and try and come back and stand in front of you again. We saw the Kelly as a value add. We thought, let us put that on our dime. Let us put that. If it's not perceived that way, and those additional because they're for the benefit of other people to utilize as well, that's okay. It'll actually end up saving us some money at the end of the day. And the sidewalk, there was a comment about safety and people walking down Kelly. I couldn't agree more. That sidewalk would be a huge benefit to improving safety along Kelly with people walking right now. So, yeah. So the sidewalk will still be there.
Yeah.
But the parking spaces, we'd reconsider.
Yeah, I think that's what you're describing. Does that sound good to the board? And if so, then what I would look for is.
Matt, I was going to ask, do we need a motion to continue?
Need a motion to continue the
Because
public hearing.
I really want to make this work, Richard. I'm just not there right now, and I really do want to make this work. So okay, Matt, I move to continue the public hearing until.
Let's see, so that's a good point. Until,
Got
dot,
one-
dot, dot.
Well, you can only have 30 days, right?
Well, the council could take it up within 30 days.
That's between the council and them.
Yeah. So the question is December enough time, or would you need more time than the December meeting is the way I'll frame it?
So the earliest opportunity would be a December meeting?
With the Thanksgiving holiday, and that putting us at within 2 weeks?
It would be the planning board meeting in December.
December 5th.
Which is December 5th.
Yep.
If that's reasonable to you.
That's reasonable for us.
Okay. There you go, Jimmy. So you can amend your motion with that.
Won't be my motion. Move to continue the public hearing until December the 5th at 4 o'clock here in Village Hall.
A second.
Motion by Jimmy, a second by Carol. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The public hearing will remain open, is continued until December 5th. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay, so planning board, though, we still do have a couple other things on our regular agenda, so hang tight.
And by the way, there's a BOA meeting right after this for one very quick issue.
So we have the next item we have on our agenda is the review and the approval of the 2025 Planning Zoning Board BOA meeting schedule.
Move approval.
Any questions or discussion from the board about the meeting schedule
I have
for
none.
2025?
You guys may just notice one date change due to a holiday, and that's the July meetings moved to the 10th. Other than that, it's standard that we've been accustomed to, the first Thursday of every month.
July the 10th.
Correct.
Yep.
Study it well, because you're going to see it here again in just a couple of minutes, that same list.
Can I have a motion?
I move that we accept the proposed list of 25 meetings.
Second.
Motion by Tom, second by Sonia. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have on there board organizational meeting items. I do want to take this opportunity to highlight that we have a board member who is sharing his final meeting with us tonight. Man, he will be missed.
He's my buddy the whole time.
I'm glad you didn't say departed.
Although there are flowers.
There are flowers. Thank you, Sonia. Wonderful. Yeah, well, your contribution to the planning board, in my time, I can't speak to what it was like before me, but in my time, I have really appreciated.
It was
working
really
with you,
rough,
Paul.
Matt. It was really
Was
rough.
it?
Yeah.
That's what I assumed.
Well, thank you very much. I certainly appreciated the last 6 years. Great people, both board members and the staff, and it's been very enjoyable. Learned a lot. Hopefully I represented the interests of Pinehurst as best as we could, and certainly the citizens. Going forward, good luck on your small area plans. I'm sure you're going to be talking about inches on a roof line going forward quite often. And I think as a board, we need to look at this very objectively, without any type of opinions going into it, obviously, and I think we do that most of the time. And then we just have to watch, I'm a starch advocate of property rights and the ability for an entrepreneur to get as much return as he can, but sometimes it collides with what Pinehurst is about, our PDO, and as we move into these two small area plans, and it's incumbent upon us to dig into the details and make the recommendations to the council. So, good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
I think we'll need it.
Other organizational items.
Ethics acknowledgement, there's a sheet in there for you guys to review the village's ethics policy, sign that acknowledgement, and get that to Jean Ann, please.
Any
Soon as you
changes since
can.
last year?
No changes. No changes.
So we can sign it.
Ethics policy. Same thing you do.
Okay.
Okay, so that brings us to our next meeting date, which, as you were just reminded of from continuing the public hearing, is December 5th, 2024. Anything else from staff? With that, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Tom. Second? Second by Bruce. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned at 6:54 p.m.
And at 6:54 and a half, we're going to open the BOA meeting. Can I have your bank?